Hey everybody, this is PD from the Spinner Rack, and we also have
Calvin Ellis, ready to rock.
today. Cal brought something to my attention on Facebook. Stan Lee's birthday just passed, and with it, some sentiments from Erik Larsen talking about Stan. Do you wanna? I'm gonna pass it off to you. What do you have to say about this? And if you want to read
Well,
it out, however you want to do it.
no, you're free to. It'll be there. Anybody wants to. Well, one, it's kind of small for me to read, but anybody wants to read it, you have no. You'll be able to enlarge it on your own. But suffice to say, Stanley, December 28th, birth. It was his birthday. Erik Larsen comes out, and I'm not 100% sure what to make of it, but it's really like a backhanded happy birthday to him, where it's questioning the validity of the contributions that Stan Lee makes in terms of comics. Did Stan take too much credit? Did he do this? Did he do that? Yet again, okay, one of these guys, mind you, Erik Larsen worked for Marvel Comics. Erik Larsen knew Stan Lee, okay, and it is only after Stan Lee's passing that for some reason now people seem to be very vocal, Marvel Comics included. And I think we already went over the origin of Marvel Comics, where they had a preface of like five different people all disputing anything that Stan Lee did, and then the only person who was in his corner would be Larry Lieber, who of course is his brother, who people would want to discount. But this is another one in a line of, I have to say, just ridiculous commentary regarding Stan Lee's contributions in terms of his writing, okay, and the creation of the Marvel Comics characters that the Silver Age Marvel comic book characters that pushed Marvel to the forefront.
Yeah. So in this thing, he kind of they want. I mean, I guess the overall point is that in the credits, at which in the credits of Marvel Comics, they have Stan Lee as writer, Jack Kirby as artist, and well, no, actually, the thing is, the hard part is that at some point later, it changed from writer to artist. It turned into a Stan and Jack production, right? And from Kirby historians, they say that that's how Kirby wanted to read, similar to the Simon and Kirby kind of credits that were all throughout the 40s. Well, yeah, 40s since Captain America to the mid 50s. So that's how they say Kirby wanted it. But then at some point, you know, as the face of Marvel, and at that point he wasn't the face that we see now, because you see that there's a thing where he had the talk show with I guess the college students and whatnot, and he does have the hairpiece, but he was very serious type of Stan, not seeing any of his humor or any of his self-effacing type of stuff or Stan the Man type of moniker. He was just kind of regular during that period, and it's not till the 70s where he becomes this. But he's pointing out that Jack Kirby drew the Rawhide Kid origin story twice, and the same dialogue ran in both of these things. Which I mean, Marvel is I'm not. It's too much to get into that to try to figure that portion out. The fact that the artists were very much involved in the plotting, yes, the bare bones plots and this that, and the other. Where it goes left is where you say Jack Kirby was drawing presentation pieces for new characters. So he had done sketches, and we have seen some of that for who OMAC. We've seen stuff
Yeah.
for cartoon stuff. I can't. The hard part is on Marvel. I don't. I have never seen a presentation piece. The only thing that it feels like.
Well,
Sorry, you go.
yeah. I mean, when you say that Jack Kirby is drawing presentation pieces, according to whom? Okay, according to whom are you saying? Is it according to Marvel Comics? Because we haven't seen any of this particular art. So where is this coming from? And then what's the line that he has here?
Some contend that
Hang on.
Jack Kirby brought Fantastic Four, Hulk,
Right.
oh sorry, Hulk, Spider-Man, Iron Man, Thor,
Iron Man,
Ant-Man,
Thor, Ant
Daredevil
Man.
is fully formed. Some who
Like,
contend.
yeah, who are these people?
Some
Who
people
are these people?
say
Especially since these guys are saying, "Hey, we brought these characters to Jack Kirby brought them to stand fully formed." even though I'm pretty certain Steve Ditko, Bill Everett, you know, a lot of these guys would be like, "What are you talking about?" you know,
Yeah.
what do you mean Jack Kirby did this? I'm pretty certain I was the one who did that one. So you're making these blanket statements, and then you're not being specific. Okay, that's why again this is so backhanded. You're not being specific. This person said this. This person did that. No, some people, so we can still do a whole bunch of, CYA at the end of the day. Some people, well, who are the people? And again, presentation pieces. At some point, you got to shut this stuff down and say, look, if they're presentation pieces, where are they? Okay, show them. All right. We know that Kirby said that he kept all, of the written discourse that he had between Stan, that he kept all the stuff. We've never seen it, even though Kirby's been on record saying that he kept it. So what became of it? Okay.
Yeah.
If you show it, then then that would go a long way towards, these claims that people want to make, these people want to insert themselves as Prince Valiant on Kirby's cause. That would go a long way towards it, but we don't see, even though on record he's saying, look, he had this particular stuff, and pardon me, but it's that the way that they like to go about doing things now. It's not, hey, Stan Lee took credit, and here's the proof. Here's the evidence that Stan Lee took the credit. No, it's, hey, I'm hearing that Stan Lee took all the credit. What do you think? And then it just starts running, and then there's nothing to substantiate it.
Well, there's the thing. That's the thing. When you go to the presentation pieces, we have Steve Ditko, who was pretty lucid when he described Spider-Man. He didn't say, Stan gave me the presentation piece of saying this is what the character is going to look like. He says, told them what they probably, talked about with Spider-Man. So giving it the idea of adding these pieces to the puzzle. So now we say, okay, so the Fantastic Four came in with a production, they didn't have costumes. The Fantastic Four didn't have costumes. They didn't. That came later, and them drawing them uniforms similar. Not even they're not even actually similar to the. They're just all identical outfits. The original um, challenges of the unknown don't have an emblem on them. They have this, which I like the original one, where they have a belt which is within the jumpsuit, so you can see there's little. I think only one who kept that design is George Perez when he drew them. So it's like the outfit, the tailoring is different. They are all in the same uniforms. They're not the same characters outside of someone saying Rocky and Ben Grimm are the same character, which they're not. But anyway, um, we don't have any proof of these presentation pieces outside of the pieces that we see for animation. We see some pieces for DC, and we see some. I don't remember seeing anything in the Kirby thing, but I'm pretty sure in the '70s they probably did have some things, but we don't have. And at the same time, there's some point where Kirby was keeping Xeroxes of his own stuff. So the if it's only in the DC period, then maybe so. But at some point, he needed to see what the pictures look like. So then when they keep going on, the thing is the credits are Stan Lee writer, Jack Kirby artist, or Stan Lee writer, plotter, Larry Lieber is a writer, and then we a scripter, and then we have the artist, that sort of thing, or Don Heck. And Don Heck is the artist. Don Heck described it as not getting a presentation piece of all the bits for Iron Man. Kirk. But the thing is, the hard part is Kirby took too much credit, and Stan Lee too much credit, and then when Kirby did the Comics Journal, he took all the credit, and then other people comment back, and we're like, we can't put that into there, saying, well, we understand because he's so mad at Stan, but that doesn't allow you to just say whatever you want. Like Don Heck, the point I'm trying to make is Don Heck came in and said, hey, the Iron Man, the cover was designed by Kirby. That came first. But, the story all drawn by me. And he had to come in and correct Kirby because Kirby said, oh, yeah, I've laid that out. I did all this stuff. And it's just like you're tearing down Stan, you're tearing down the whole thing because we both of them, which hurt me, wasn't that Stan took all the credit because when you have him on a TV show and you say, hey, what did you do? Oh, I created Spider-Man, the Hulk. At some point they weren't even saying the X-Men, the Thor, this, that, and the other. And then when you see a more in-depth thing, he said, I was working on with this with Jack Kirby, and we talked about it and this, that, and the other. In the comic books, they ask them for scripts, and that people keep asking for scripts. I don't write scripts. I have a story conference, and most of the artists drew their relationship of them artists sometimes being cantankerous with Stan, but then working together. Stan having an idea. That's the Ditko one. I got an idea. Calling up Ditko, or the Kirby one, where the two of them are just, as John Romita described, the two of them just throwing ideas out at each other as they work together. And there's one written version of their story conference in the New York Herald Tribune, which is a bare bones plot, but it hurt Kirby because it felt like, oh, I'm taking dictation. It's not what the guy said. The guy said it was an ESP session with his artist. That means a lot more than what we're hearing. But to Kirby, it was like he's not writing me as a writer, and he liked the writer, but he was mad at Stan, and it turned into his wife having to say something. But this thing kind of on Facebook kind of blow up, and I don't think I've gotten through the whole thing, but it's just kind of tough that people come, it comes around time, and then it's just like, how much more can we take down? Till we take Stan down for what reason? When ultimately it was easier when we said it was just a collaboration. And for the time when Jack Kirby passed, the historians were saying it was a collaboration, and no one was out here saying this stuff. And now that he's passed, when you could, the thing is, he says at the end, I think in some of these things they say, "Why do you say it now?" Say, "What, I could have said it the day before." You could said it when he was alive, to in print, because actually, he doesn't sign his name to everything. He did the name withheld in the '90s, where he didn't want to sign his name to stuff. He just wanted to complain about writers, and then ultimately at some point he owned up to it. But he was around. A lot of people who complain about Bob Kane complained about him while he was alive. In comic book field, thing, a lot of people said what they had to say. If you had issue with it, waking up now, and then that's the thing, it turns left as we go along. So as we go along, there's more comments, and then they talk about, he said, there's someone, I got people's names I shouldn't have here, but I'll hopefully remember to take them out. It says, hey, Stan also created Stan's soapbox. He stood on that for a very long time. And Erik Larsen responds, a lot of those things were ghosted by others. Many other writers plotted the Stanley strip as well. He didn't do much of anything alone. Now, the soapbox, I don't know if he's talking about when Stan came back to the soapbox, that one page thing, because I was following it, and I don't know. The hard part of it is the soapbox, the strip is different. So adding in the strip, that's the thing. When you start talking and you're kind of making up not he's making up a story, but at the same time, you're building your case. The person talked about Stanley's soapbox and saying, oh, that was ghosted by others. And they're saying, so a lot of those things were ghosted by others, and talk about the strip. We know, yeah, Roy Thomas said, towards the end there, he was definitely doing it. And then I think the shooter said in the 80s, they would help Stan plot the strips as well. So they would work together with him on the strips and whatnot. But at the same time, Stan also had a day job. But the thing is, I was reading Stan's soapbox for a while, and some of the stuff that he was giving in there, especially the period I was reading, it was his, he was talking about Marvel World of Tomorrow. And the fact that if it was someone else doing it, it would kind of, that portion of it, at least when I was reading it, it'd be kind of weird because it was inside information that was not out at Marvel at all. Actually, the Marvel people didn't even know about it. They didn't find out about it until Byrne brought in Marvel World Tomorrow. And he's like, wait a second, Stan wasn't supposed to let you know. If they wrote it, they would have said, like, no, Stan, like, can you take that out? No. You can see when it abruptly stopped when, things went left. When that, Byrne brought it in, they're like, well, we want some changes, and Stan, anything Stan said to you, we can't follow through with it, which was heartbreaking on the Burn side of that. Stan had no power. So Kurt Busiek kind of gets into this, and he kind of talks about, the other editors, the other terrific editors, He said, but he said, and Stan, who was a strong editor and marketer, even if his ethics could use a vast improvement. And it's just like, come on, dude. Why are you going? It's like, yes, the credits could have co-plotter in it. It could have said the ones that Kirby plotted, but
See, I'll push back against that because they're asking Stan Lee to have the sensibilities of people in 2024 or 2006 and not understanding, look, what was the dynamic of the day, okay? And was what was actually what was going on, number one. And two, we've already commented on this before. Previous to a lot of the stuff that was going down with Marvel Comics, you didn't get any credits.
yeah,
It was the comic book. We don't know who did the comic book. You'll look at something like where Frank Miller's first published work is Twilight Zone for Gold Key, and there are no credits for any of the stories.
yes,
Okay, the only reason why we know it is because Frank Miller told us. So when they say Jack Kirby is the king, the first person to do that was Stan Lee, and put in those credits. So when they're talking about co-plotting that type of along those type of lines, yeah, sure. I think that's something that we would have definitely imagined here. And you do have people like the thing that I heard mostly from the people was like not so much that they wanted a co-plotting credit, they wanted money. They were like, hey, since I'm doing more work at the end of the day, I should definitely be getting some more money when it comes over there. And then the co-plotting thing, I think that's something that comes a little bit later down the line. But well, I guess, and to be fair, a little bit of pushback on what I'm saying, the Marvel method wasn't the standard method for how it went at the end of the day. But for what but in being fair for what it was, nobody was looking at it with the same eyes and with the same scope of what we're looking at today. You can't judge it by 2024 sensibilities.
yeah, and it's that's the thing, and the Stan and Jack credits. The hard part is there's things to point out when you look at what's that thing when you look at the credits and say that's the thing. Yeah, I think we get into it in here. Some of these later ones. That's what he points out there. Erik Larsen puts it. There's no good time to do it. A good time is to do it with to his face. Like do it. The thing is,
Yeah,
he
yeah,
felt that way because that's the thing. The many a creator has been. I think he's going at I think who's it Roy Thomas at some points in his, Roy Thomas's defense of Stan, but that's not related to Stan. It's not. Everyone acts like he's got a paycheck from Stan coming in, and that's why he's defending him. But it's like that sort of thing. It's just like it just goes left here, and then and Kurt Busiek backs that up, saying being critical on guys living versus is more likely to hurt. The deceased guys won't hear it, and it's just like, good lord, why Kurt?
yeah. Well, again, that's the same thing you should put to someone like Kirby Sick. Then why are you saying this at all?
Yes, yes. So the thing is, and the thing is, that's what Stan said to Kirby. Like they're gonna who did what is gonna be criticized for a long time. He said, but the thing of it is the magic they had together. And this is the thing. They're not listening to that portion. They're tearing to tear down and say, that like everything is gone here. Like there's no. It's just like being on the end and in the know. It's like the same time, the person who was the biggest supporter of Kirby as far as getting it out there was Stan. As more Stan is trying to help out. Oh, he was. We're both writers on this thing, and they were. Oh, we got him. We got him. He said we're both writers. Like he planned on saying that. It wasn't a slip of the tongue and he pulled it back. Like, people go to that searching for Ditko thing. It was a statement that, sometimes he brings some of his stories in. Sometimes I just tell him who the villain is. And sometimes I give him a plot. Like either or, that sort of thing. So, and then, it goes into someone say, what did Kirby create? And then that's what this gets into. And they always go to Stripperella, this, that, and the other. And it's just like, the hard part is that
They bring up Stripperella. Okay.
That's the
Yeah,
thing. When
that's
you go to it, it's like, okay, what characters did Stan create without Jack? He said without Stan, Kirby created. No, when they say Kirby created, Kirby co-created Captain America. He co-created. If we're talking about credit, right? We can't just sit around here and we're going to talk and we're going to keep throwing credit around here. Then we have to say this, and then Ditko, of course, gets thrown in here, and Ditko is a totally different argument because Ditko didn't, outside of complaining about Doctor Strange and a couple of statements, then he said it to, he made his comments plain presently. That's the difference between what's going on here. What he had issue with, and at the same time, he said they were collaborators, and until they stopped talking, that's when he started. He asked for plotting credit. They turned it into he asked for plotting credit, and and then it turned into Stan closing the door off. At that point, we were, I think it almost seems like the issue was the story where the end of Spider-Man, where Spider-Man looks like a chicken and kind of runs away. Then his mask gets messed up, and he's very dejected. And in that story, like Stan, not that he had issue, just saying, "Hey, can you tone down? Who's the name? Was it J. Jonah Jameson with the smile?" And he said that Dick was like, "No, when Spider-Man comes out, when that's going to be the moment he turns from the great Gildersleeve to being broken after Spider-Man comes back and saves the day." And that's what he did. But that's where we didn't get at that point. The fans weren't going towards Ditko. They were still for Stan. And he was like, "All right, this isn't a debate here. I'm just telling you what was going on here and some of the issues that Stan had with some of the stories." And this is where we go. So we go to, the it said, so when they get to the ghost thing, it said, a lot of things were ghosted by others. Many other writers plotted the Spider-Man strips. He didn't do much of anything alone. That already pointed out at that point. There was something else here. He said, heck, and then Bruce said, heck, for a while, standing in the script, the Spider-Man comic, Roy did it for years. But at the same time, how old was he? 90? He stopped scripting at 90. And the thing is this, they're still, they're keeping the name on the same thing. It's just like, it's like what is that? You can pronounce it right for me. It's like editor emeritus, that sort of title.
Yeah,
So
emeritus. Yeah.
emeritus is like, come on, like they're gonna go to task that he was taking credit. It's like
But
Roy.
see, that's the problem. It becomes like we gotta like. It's not a matter of hey, we just want everybody to understand that these guys were collaborators. Okay, that they worked together. Sometimes one guy might have worked more than the other, but all of this was through the collaboration of both of them. That's really what we should be hearing. And instead, it's like no, we want to totally erase and. I mean, it's just cancel culture at the end of the day. We want to just this guy needs to be like totally, out of the view because of the way that we feel about it, not because of the actual facts of it, okay, but because of how we feel about it. And I've said this before. The one constant with all of this stuff is Stan Lee. It's you take Stan out of the picture, you don't have any of this. And then Stan is also the guy. Stan is also the guy saying, no, no, these guys are talented enough that I don't have to babysit them with the script, okay, to make certain that this is going to come out right. I can trust them, to do these type of things, and we can still get these books out, and we can still get this thing done. Because a lot of people forget that he was an editor. The thing that they're looking at is that he was sitting in some office, stacking paper from the floor to the ceiling, while these guys are doing all the work, and he's stealing all the credit, and that's not the case. And the other thing, nobody cares. Nobody cares about co-plotting credit on Ghost Rider, the Western, or Rawhide Kid, Millie the Model, Patsy Walker, okay, or any of the other titles that Stan was working on. It's only the key Marvel book. And it's not all the Marvel books either. Because I never hear anybody jump up and down over Sergeant Fury. It's only, like it's only a handful of titles that everybody wants to pour into. And then, and I've said this before, if they are really supportive of Kirby, as a creator, well, fourth world is where everybody should be, blowing the loudest trumpet at the end of the day. And they have almost nothing to say about it. Nothing. But this right over here is the hill that they want to die. The hill that they want to die on, especially if it means they can take a scalp in the form of Stan Lee.
And here I've got another statement here, which is there are some who claim he as in Stan didn't script all of the Marvel books that he's credited with scripting, but I don't have any inside knowledge of that. I think then he goes
So
to
then why are you saying it?
yeah. So then, but
That's the
then
thing.
he adds into the goes back to the Spider-Man strip. I think Salicrups plotted the Spider-Man strip for a while. I think he'll recall him saying that plotting and scripting are two different things. So the concept of keeping a succinct thing, and we don't need to go to you don't know he knows who claimed, and that's not the claim. The thing is that Mark Evans turned what Kirby said into when Kirby wrote a story, he meant the liner notes and all that stuff, right? And that was a written story, and then anyone can turn it into a comic book that's published. And that's not what he said. Kirby said he didn't do anything. He said Stan didn't write the books. He didn't write any of those. I wrote those. And then the interview said the dialogue and he said I did it. I wrote everything. He didn't do anything. I don't know. He might have read something. So he probably had someone else write something. So Kirby is the one who added in the Ghost Rider, but he added in that Stan did no writing. So this thing of didn't do all or that sort of thing, and they're going into the like Stan. What's the point? Like there's a fill-in that Erik Larsen did for Thor. Thor fights the Hulk, and it's plotted by Jim Shooter and it's scripted by Stan. That story, there's no reason why they would throw Stan's credit on this Thor fill-in, which is clearly a fill-in. It's not Simonson, it's not Ron Friends and Tom DeFalco. It's clearly a fill-in, and Stan is writing a script. There's no importance to having Stan write a script for that issue, besides him just writing a script. Like, what is the point? Like, for was it just imagine, yes, but it's just like some of the stuff of adding in. Some people say the Fox News reporting and this that. Some say like say who said it. You don't want to say because it doesn't. When you say that Kirby said Stan didn't do anything, then it's like well you have to question it. We don't want to hear Kirby saying that. That's what you're not
Yeah.
want to face, and that's what I had to face. I'm like I want co-plotting in these. I wish they had co-plotting. If he only said that, not saying, I'm just saying in afterthought, thinking like the way the X-Men, even though when you put in the co-plotting credit points early on, the writers weren't really cool with it either. Even though they were doing plotting, they weren't cool with the co-plotting credit, and least of all, not Chris Claremont either. That's one of the other fights. But at the same time, they're looking at it and saying, like that's looking at it and saying, oh, I wish that time the time we have now is what is in the past. And this is where Kurt Busiek starts to go left because he starts interjecting Ditko in here, right? So then he says, Roy talks about plotting it and he stopped dying. But we know that Roy had already established that. That's not, but at the same time, it was like a little before his death, he owned up that he wasn't, but it wasn't about that. It's like having, that's the way the old strips were. Like, the old school, you have, what was it, Kane, Crandall, or whoever the thing is, the famous artist, and they have somebody doing it. At some point, the strip still hadn't moved past that portion. So you can still say, and the brand name is still Stan. It's good to have them in there, that sort of thing. But it's just going too far going into the strips because, yes, shooters talked about plotting it, this, that, and the other, but Stan was still scripting it. Stan was the one who was like, I want to marry him. And it turned and it put Marvel into, even though Shooter says that it was his decision, not Stan's, but somehow everyone had to get under a fire after the idea came up. But I just want to get to what's this thing? Oh, Alan Schumer, he talks about it. But Alan Schumer, he kind of gets into the thing of where the plot's actually Kirby's, like, how do you know that it wasn't Kirby type of stuff? So there's this new thing where they're saying, I think that there's the Tom Scully guy, he did the Kirby from Kirby's view, of how the stories that Kirby came in with all these things, and he came with the plots of stories he wasn't doing. He was plotting, giving the plot to Stan. Stan would then do Iron Man and all these other stories. Like there's no Stan's brother's not involved in it. It was always they've added too much craziness. But here's where it goes really left because the Ditko went on record a lot in small spreads.
Arlen Schumer
Okay,
wrote
go
that.
ahead.
We're like, oh wow, these guys are all tripping.
Yeah, I
They're
think.
all tripping. How do you know Kirby didn't write it? Read Fourth World.
Oh my God.
How do you know Kirby? How do you know that wasn't what Kirby did? Read Fourth World. It's pretty clear. Read Fourth World. It's not hard.
The hard, that was the no, that was the harder part for a lot of people, and that when it got to that saying this the separation between Stan and Jack, which Stan did not want, that's when people were saying they could see the difference. And I'm not copping to that portion of it, but that's where people had the harder time where they were just like, well, we see which part of which of this thing is. And now we know Kirby had a large involvement in all those stories, but at the same time, you know, it was a harsh difference between the two. So Dicker went on record a lot and small press stuff. He and Robin Schneider published. Hopefully Dicko's air will let it be made more widely available. And then
Well, we had that great interview where where Kirby's on the radio. Kirby's on the radio, and he's pretty much going into the mode. He's saying a bunch of stuff, and who happens to call in? That's right, Stan Lee. Who happens to call in but Stan Lee? And so it's like, oh, but that for me, that is the pivotal moment. Okay, so for anybody like a Erik Larsen or anything, where Steve Ditko is on record, okay, on record while he's alive, while Stan's alive, he's on record about what was going on and answering questions as to what was going on or chiming in when he's like, wait a second, that's not accurate. I'm not really into all this other type of stuff, but this right over here involving me, that's not accurate. This is what happened. Right there in that interview, that is the moment for Jack to say, Stan, you never wrote anything. Okay, you didn't write anything. I was doing it all. I was taking the whole live. You didn't give me any credit. That's the time. And mind you, okay, the other side of that is not that, because you could say, well, hey, look, Kirby. Well, I guess Kirby wanted to be polite and so on and so forth. If Stan is the guy that everybody's making him out to be, he would have never called in.
yeah.
He would have never called in. He probably was like, what? Wait a minute, what's going on?
Well, the
What's going
thing.
on? He's like, let me call in. Let me call in and talk to this guy. And then, of
Mhm.
course, again, I'm finding out some of these guys, good creators, good writers, good artists, very poor historians. Because the same guys who are saying this would be like, they would be flabbergasted to find out that Kirby and Stan are sharing, limos later on. Even after the interview, yet these guys still had interaction. They really want to break it down to whatever they see inside of a documentary, and leave it there, and they don't have the full picture and the full story.
Hmm. The thing is, with the other part of it is with that interview, there's a portion where he's like Stan offers up, and I like to say all of the dialogue that are in those books, that's my dialogue, and you have to imagine that hearing Kirby say Stan didn't write anything, and Stan isn't asking for plot. He isn't saying I want plot. The hard part is that knowing the hard part is that the dialogue is a big portion of the comic book too, which people don't like to say. Yes, the story, the plot, pacing, whether Stan gave you one sentence is one thing. That's a big thing. But Stan isn't even fighting over the plots anymore. He's just saying, on our books, I wrote all the dialogue. And that would be the place where, as you were saying, to say that he didn't, or say, well, he did say, oh, my dialogue was in there. And it's like, that's not dialogue. That couldn't be put in the word, the balloons. And it. It's like, you couldn't, you said, people don't, it's like you probably didn't even read our stories, did you? Or you should read my stories, did
Yeah. And
you?
then when you look at the dialogue, that's where it goes back. When these guys are like, oh, it was like, very loose plot. It was only one sentence. And then they seem to forget that there was a lot of discussion that happened with these books, where I know Dick Ayers is on record saying that he would record their discussions. So you don't need to record one sentence. You don't need to record a
Yes,
paragraph. But there's
yes,
obviously some
yes.
talk that must have gone on, because when it comes time for Stan to dialogue, he's not. I would try again. I would challenge anybody. Take a comic that has no word bubbles whatsoever. Look over the story and now fill in the dialogue so it all makes sense. It's not easy, but it's a lot easier if you actually know what the story is and you've had some discussion as to how this thing is supposed to flow out. That's a lot easier. And there's a reason why the conversation is being recorded. The Marvel method, and Stan goes, it's like the Stan Lee method. This was the idea of like, look, I'm the only editor here. I'm working with the skeleton crew at the end of the day, and I got to get these books out.
Mhm.
That's the big thing at the end of the day. So yeah, the least amount, anything I can do to cut down with these particular books, because sorry people, it was not just Iron Man, Thor, or rather Journey into Mystery, Tales of Suspense, Fantastic Four. It wasn't just those books. They had a whole line of books that most people have never even heard about. Romance comics, war comics. They had a whole line of stuff that was coming out. Stan was the guy on all of that. That's something that really needs to be taken into. That's something that really needs to be taken into account. But again, for me, the Jack Kirby interview, that's the big moment. Okay, Stan comes over and says, "Look, I wrote all the dialogue on those books. It's not contested. It's not contested at the end of the day. That was the point to do it." So when I hear people, I'm just surprised when I look at this. Well, Erik Larsen, I can't say I'm too surprised, but Busiek, Schumer, and you look and you're like, wow, even the historians are not pretty good historians at the end of the day.
Well, the thing is that, and you want to say, well, what if? No, the thing is, what we want to say is, what if Jack stayed, and it wasn't, whether he was digging pins into his Stan doll when Stan was coming in. He comes in with Hulk issue 6, and he gets rejected, and it's just like, oh, well, how did they get rejected? It's it was Kirby's. These are all Kirby's books, or the Black Panther gets totally redone and changed and all that stuff, and say that's obviously him working with with Stan at some point. So this just gets into this thing where now that Stan is dead, we get into this thing where we're adding stuff in there where we're not using, like here they have Kurt saying they weren't having an argument about the direction of character. They weren't talking about Spider-Man and Stan. So he's like, Ditko said Stan refused to talk to him. Pretty strongly suggested that's why he quit. Why should he work for someone who didn't want to collaborate and won't speak to him? That sort of thing. And they said by the time he quit, he'd been getting credit for plotting and drawing his books, mainly because he insisted on it. I suspect that's part of why Stan refused to talk to him. Now, see, he's adding in more stuff. This is another thing that they added in, which Ditko did not say. He didn't. The thing is, they never said why. He never said, I came and asked for plotting credit, which would be pretty clear. He didn't say, I asked for plotting credit and Stan stopped talking to me. He said that he said that they were having long arguments and discussions. There was discussion. There was stuff that Ditko said no to, and but talked in the
But see, this right here is disingenuous, because it's the same thing I've been railing against. Uh, by the time Ditko quit, he'd been getting credit for plotting and drawing his book, so that's off the table. Mainly because he insisted on it. Doesn't matter, he was getting it. I suspect that's a big part. You don't know.
yeah.
You don't know. Even Ditko himself doesn't know. Stan never spoke to it. You don't know. Your speculation, okay? Your suspicions are meaningless. You don't know. But the whole idea is that, hey, let's throw some more scattered Stan if we can, okay? Because there's a little bit of room left. You don't know why they weren't talking.
He,
Okay, Ditko doesn't know. For all we know, Ditko did something and doesn't even remember it. I can suspect that at the end of the. I can suspect that at the end of the day. It doesn't matter. One, I would be totally wrong, and two, I don't know.
well, the other thing is that I mean, if I would say I suspect if they stop talking after issue 18, and he gets plotting credit on issue 25, he's like, well, I'm basically coming in with the story here, and me and Stan aren't talking about it. So, Sal, you need to give me plotting credit for it. And the same for, no, actually, the thing is, the plotting credit, this is the thing. This is the thing. Just go and read like this. You don't. It doesn't matter. Curtis said earlier in the one I've said before. I hope that those small press things get put into a bigger thing. If you go into it, he said he turned the stand on Doctor Strange. Is like, hey, I can see you struggling with this. Obviously, paraphrasing, but he said, hey, why are you putting Don Rico on the book? Let me plot Doctor Strange. So that's how the idea, him getting plotting credit, saying, hey, let me plot this book now. Like, don't give it to anybody else because, like, I think I can make this work. And that's when we get the long arc where he starts plotting. So I'd have to look at the actual dates, but he did say at that point he asked Stan for plotting credit. And then there's issue 18 of Spider-Man where they stop talking. And then issue 25 where he gets plotting credit. So there's a gap. There's not an instant, oh, I asked for plotting credit. Oh, not talking anymore. So whatever happened, he doesn't know what happened, but he had already asked for plotting credit for one title. And then when they're not talking, he asked for plotting credit because he wasn't having any more conferences with Stan. He said when he looked at the thing for, for the plot for the Amazing Fantasy, this was more involved than the 5 pages we were doing before. So it's like there was something else that was there. And he talks about working, and he talks about when Stan, in public took too much credit. And he talked about when Stan gave him credit. And he pointed out the parts where he said, this is equal credit. This is like that. And he's like, at some point he asked Stan, hey, write something. And Stan wrote it. And he didn't like what he wrote. And then at the same time, but they were at least talking. This is the thing that gets lost when we're going into it. We're saying, we're going to take bits of what Ditko said when this is what Ditko hated. He said, someone said that I left because of money. No. It's like because he wanted a portion of the ownership of this, that, and the other. It's like all the stuff that the fans make up. That's how he fell apart with the fan because he was like they were coming in and adding in stuff that wasn't there. He would run into different things, or they'd be like, hey, didn't you ink all this smutty stuff for your friend? Like, what is this smutty? Like, no, I don't want to talk about it. He's like, well, some fans you are. He wasn't saying those words, but it's just like that. Take all your bits and put it into the real thing, right? Because the problem is, Kurt Busiek also, more than anyone, probably knows more, has more bits in mind. But at the same time, if you're reading the same subject matter that I'm reading, then you read that, hey, they're talking. We're not talking about, hey, how did Sergeant Fury get made? Oh, you say, I asked Stan, why are you doing another war book? He said, well, Martin Goodman asked me, could I do a book like the Fantastic Four with a war book? That's how the idea of that came. No, Kirby always talked about the war. I gave the plot for Thor to Larry Lieber, and then we got it to Kirby. No, Kirby knows more about the Norse god than Stan does. So like, come on, this is like we're going too far in our thing. Saying the thing is, give him the same credit that Stan gave. Saying, hey, a lot of times Stan use what he said, but at the same time, don't take it and just I'm going to go off the cliff. Stan didn't write anything. Some people say I haven't found that. Bring out the FF presentation piece where they don't have costumes, they design that sort of thing. We have Stan's plot, but no, Stan wrote a plot that is different from the actual inside of the comic books, but he wrote it so he could prove that he wrote the book. Somehow he just wrote it out of the blue and it's not directly. If he was making a fake plot for the Fantastic Four, wouldn't he just look at it and write the exact thing that happened and said, here, I made a plot? No, he had his original plot, and as usual, Jack Kirby changed things. He's like, oh, she's not gonna be invisible all the time. There's so many bits, there's a couple bits that are taken out there. But if an artist goes straight from the script and you're like, I gotta get this stuff out, this is what you can see throughout the book. There's the issue of what was it, Daredevil, Spider-Man, and Thor versus the Fantastic Four, and Daredevil is beating up Thing and Reed Richards at the same time, and they're like, "Oh, a blast came from the floor." It's like this art is too good, but there's so much wrong with it. I can't reject it, so I'm going to try to fix it with the dialogue. So, this is the thing. Whereas, it's just tough. It's easier for Kurt and the thing is, that's the thing. You don't want to be. It's easier to be. There's enough sentiment now that you can speak your mind and say all this stuff. We have pros. I mean, we have. I think it was John Byrne. He was talking about Roy Thomas. Pretty much the same thing that Kurt said in defense of Kirby. That like that sort of thing. But he got railed on hot coals for saying something about him, and he had to, be taken to task for it. This thing of when the person is gone and not having the heart to say it because of what, like you can say all this stuff. All right, I'm going to say my last thing. I'm going to get out of here. This portion here, Erik Larsen talks about talking to Stan, right? When I talk to Stan, he's very forthcoming about taking credit for other people's work. He was writing Just Imagine, Stanley books at DC, and bellyaching about how he's actually have to write stories for others to draw, right? Now, there's there's also a part that's lost in this description of being. I listened to a interview. I wish I still had it. I think I have it somewhere, but there's Stan, Tom DeFalco, and Ron Friends and Sal Buscema, and Stan is the most effacing, self-depreciating I've ever heard him. Like he doesn't stop when he's with these people that are his friends. He just kept at one point he thinks he's getting off the phone, and he's like, "What?" He said, "No, Stan, you're still on the phone." Oh, you guys, and then he says another insult to himself, and it's like we don't know the like him doing a joke about it turns into belly aching. It's just like, come on, like.
Well, that I think we would also have to go with that. It was already an article where Stan did an interview, and he wasn't scripting these books. He plotted them. All right, so the Marvel method was still in swing at the end of the day. So I'm not sure exactly what he was. What he's saying that he was belly aching about writing a plot. Cause remember, he said that he was sitting down, he was working on. I think it was the Batman issue,
Mhm.
and he said he was just like working on it. But mind you, this is a totally different thing because in the interview he's like, I started and I thought maybe I'd get a few paragraphs off before I was done. I already had like 2 pages of plot written out,
Mhm.
so it seemed like he was actually enjoying himself. That's the one in print. Okay, that interview right there, those are his words in print. I don't know about this belly aching with Erik Larsen. Erik Larsen says that's what happened. That's Erik Larsen's perspective. So, but what's in print is that he was enjoying himself.
And the other thing is this is where I first found this thing out. But then now they say it's just other people. Like, what was it? Well, no, actually, the thing is, what was it? Once what was it? Once the Silver Surfer was a success, what was it? Oh, what was it? Michael Elslin, the guy who did the Batman movies. I think that's what his
Mm-hmm.
name is. He so had Stan and Mobius in the same room, and he's like, "You guys need to do a book together. You need to have to do the Silver Surfer." So then, what was it? In the I was online. They were like, "Oh, this is a great story by Mobius. And this, that, and the other." I was like, "What are you talking about?" And he's like, "Oh, all the books Stan kind of did was kind of written by the artist." And I was like, "No, that's not what Mobius said." It's like, "What did he say?" I was like, "He said Stan sent him a plot." And and I tried to make everything interesting so when Stan wrote the dialogue, they would be interesting faces for him to write stuff to. But he gave me, he sent me a plot. I think it was like 6 pages, and that was it. And then they fall apart. But now they've thrown that out the water. It was somebody else. But he had a couple of Silver Surfer books ready. He had the Enslavers also, which he did with Keith Pollard. So, it's like this thing of where we want to go in. And the other thing is that, at that time, if we can't put that to it because there are books that Stan did, like, what was it? I have it here. So I don't have it somewhere further, but we have this Silver Surfer graphic novel, which this one was mainly plotted by John Buscema, but it's also plotted with Tom DeFalco, and Stan did the dialogue. The credits are the plot is by Tom DeFalco and John Buscema, but the script is by Stan. And Stan, when he wrote up, I think his foreword is Buscema wanted to write his own story. I'm glad to be on the ride with him. So he doesn't, that sort of thing. So it's just like if he's getting, if he's being credited as just a scripter on that, I think on John Byrne's Silver Surfer issue, and then he's not, there's no strip kind of, I don't know. And actually, the strip is too small to have too many credits. Usually, there's stuff Neil Adams did in the strips for people that didn't have his name on it at all. So, that's the strip is a very different thing, but at the time where they were crediting people for plotting stories and Stan was scripting, one Erik Larsen was involved in. There's one, Silver Surfer I just pointed out, and then there's two Silver Surfers that don't have plotters on there. So there would be no reason to now just say all these things were done by somebody else, and he just always had somebody there. The plot might be not sitting around there doing. I mean, the average comic book plot would be, can be six pages. I think Marv Wolfman, when he was at Marvel, some of his plots were 2 pages, but at the same time, he was one of the top guys. It's like the plotting thing just let open the floodgates for the artist to just be the director of the book and kind of pace out the stuff. And as we go in and say, this Marvel method was, Stan not there and Kirby writing the book and dialogue in the books and that sort of thing. Because who's that guy? Gary Groth couldn't say to him that, well, you didn't actually write the dialogue in in the balloons, right? Because and then that's when Kirby added it. And it must have been, could have been someone else in the office, but I wrote all those stories. So, this is the thing where we going left. We're adding stuff in there, and we're holding Stan to task for the credits as they were for accepting the line of Jack and Kirby, Stan Lee and Jack production on a lot of credits, which they say Mark Evans, but that's what they say Mark Evans is a liar too. So it's just, and he's been the one that's been, in court saying all this stuff and that to supposedly back up saying, no, they didn't own anything. Well, I'm trailing off because it's too emotional to go into. It was so hard to hear Kirby say he wrote everything when we know what Stan's dialogue is like. We know the difference between Stan's dialogue and Roy Thomas's dialogue, and the difference with Denny O'Neil. Those are the early ones, and different from his brother Larry Lieber. So it's like we know dialogue-wise that was the final linchpin that was the struggle for Kirby because the dialogue was the thing. And when he came back, he was like, I'm not doing having this relationship. He would be writing the stuff that he did. And I think no one really was in his corner to kind of get the dialogue up to snuff to what the times were, and it would be a harder thing to do that because, he was going head to head. He was going, I'm taking this, going to DC, making my way. And, DC wasn't going to be as protective as he was with Kirby because ultimately, he wasn't let stay on a book that wasn't selling. X-Men doesn't sell. Kirby's off that book. Avengers not selling as much. You're off this book. That sort of thing. Oh, we can have you do some fill-ins more than have you stick on book that's not selling, and DC was a different environment than that. So there we discussed this. He was around for you to, at that point when you met him, you could have said, hey, all the stuff you wanted to say to stand there. Not all, it doesn't have to be on his birthday. There's so many people just taking shots at Stan all the time, but they're doing more so now that he's gone. So which is a tough thing to see. You know?
Well, well, it just goes to show you, it just goes to show you the caliber and the character of a person when you decide to take your shots.
Yes, yeah. All right, that's about it. Spinner rack is
Well, out.
out.